Margaret Sanger. Here it has several places where it talks about Woodrow Wilson, but in a positive light. Let's start with a little bit on Woodrow Wilson. Tell me about Woodrow Wilson's position on race.
He was an arch segregationist. He segregated the American Armed Forces.
Okay, not segregated before he got in.
Yeah, and segregated the post office as well, which is difficult, but he did that. And he reduced the number of African Americans enrolled in the federal government.
Did he not also, because he wanted to be a little more subtle, did he not also introduce that if you were going to apply for a job in the federal government, suddenly there needed to be a picture attached?
Yes.
Yes. So he was
the picture attached in the post office, right?
Right.
Because that would be one way to keep
right. Okay.
Segregated.
He also, tell me about this. I've had this in my briefcase for about a week. I haven't had time to watch this yet. This is a movie. If I'm not mistaken, wasn't this the first big silent movie, or the first silent movie?
Yes.
First big one.
Yes.
Okay. And tell me what it is. Birth of a Nation. Do either guys?
Well, it's basically the history of the Civil War and Reconstruction is seen through the eyes of a Klansman.
Okay. I've read, and I don't know if this is true, I have read that this was based on Wilson's writings. True or false?
I don't know about that.
You don't know?
I've heard that, but I haven't verified it.
You haven't verified that. This movie, would you agree that this is a very racist movie?
It is.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It glorifies the Klan.
Absolutely.
This movie was premiered at the White House. It was shown at the White House for Woodrow Wilson, who claimed that it was one of the best movies, of all time. It will really tell American history. Tell me about what Woodrow Wilson did at the universities when African Americans wanted to apply. Now at Princeton, there is, if I'm not mistaken, the African American scholarship. I think it's the Woodrow Wilson Scholarship, is it not? And he said that it was nonsense for something like this for African Americans to try to get higher education. Did he not?
He certainly didn't believe that blacks had the capabilities to finish college, at least in large numbers.
Okay, so how did he get to be this guy who, at best, is neutral in the history books? Because I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Do you think that the theory that Woodrow Wilson really was the reason we had World War II is accurate? He defanged Britain. He forced Britain into dropping their ally, Japan. Did he not? He was the one who really pushed with the League of Nations, the peace treaty, and all of that debt that Germany had. I mean, he's really, the progressive ideas were the ones that set the world up for World War II.
He was an internationalist in that sense, for sure. He wanted the League of Nations. He wanted power to gravitate toward the League of Nations, away from the United States, certainly, or individual national entities. But I think it's his redistributionist policies that also make him very popular with textbook writers. When Wilson came in, we didn't have an income tax, at least one that was operable. The 13th Amendment came in 1913. Then we get a progressive tax. We're taxing the rich more than others. And that tax is raised up to over 70% by the time he gets out of office.
And he promises that it'll never go over 10, didn't he?
Those were the initial promises. It would never go. It was 7. The first rate was 7, but it's over 70. Now, of course, we have World War I coming in.
Which he promised would never be fought.
Right.
I'll keep you out of war.
But then in 1919 and 20, when the war was over, the tax remained high.
Did he not say, when America thwarted him on the League of Nations, he said basically what Barack Obama has said during health care. Well, I haven't explained it enough. And he went on a whistle train tour of America to try to explain it. When America rejected it, didn't he say, I think I've read this someplace, that it's God's will and God won't be thwarted on this, right?
He very much believed he was operating for God, and that it wouldn't be thwarted, and thus he was very surprised when it was, in fact, thwarted.
Now, it was under the Wilson administration, at least, that social justice started working its way into the churches. Was that part of Woodrow Wilson?
This actually predates Wilson. You get these guys like Walter Rauschenbusch and the whole progressive theologians who believe in this notion of redistributive justice and sharing of all the goods. But Wilson believes that he's on a, to quote John Belushi, a mission from God. He's here to remake the world. And you mentioned Versailles. He goes into Versailles and he gives away the farm. He gives the British what they want. They don't want a German army. All right, whatever. No German Navy. The French don't want a German army. All right, fine. No German army. The Italians want land. Okay, you get land. All I want is the League of Nations. He gives away everything that you can actually get in order to obtain something that you can't have, which is international peace and love and harmony.
And that's when everybody went kind of underground. Progressivism got a really bad name.
Very bad.
So they just changed to liberals, right? And kind of reappeared again under FDR and just put it all through. They learn from their mistakes.
Right, they did. But the 1920s obviously was a very bad decade for progressives. We had budget surpluses every year.
Okay, when we come back, Hillary Clinton has said, well, she's not a hero in all things. She doesn't, she knows she was a person that had some flaws, but she admires her. Margaret Sanger. Let's introduce you to the real Margaret Sanger, another progressive hero, when we come back. The truth about history, sign up for our Insider Extreme account at glennbeck.com. Watch our special Friday features this week, top liberal lies based on Larry Schweikart's book, 48 Liberal Lies. Back with us, Larry Schweikart and Burton Folsom Jr. Before we go to Margaret Sanger, we were just having a conversation off air because we were talking about this racist movie, Birth of a Nation, that was Woodrow Wilson, based on, I'm almost positive it was based, what was the name of that book?
History of the
United States by Woodrow Wilson. Just a racist Klan movie, that's all it is. And so we started talking about it in Reconstruction, and during the break I asked, Abraham Lincoln, I know this is a really controversial idea. I think Abraham Lincoln was a good guy, but there's a lot of people, especially down south, think Abraham Lincoln was a bad guy. Good guy, bad guy?
I like Lincoln a lot. I realize that he goes overboard in terms of many executive powers during the Civil War. You can justify those by wartime needs. But
he gives them back. It's like Washington. He could be a tyrant, but he restores the rights, and that's important.
You know what's so amazing about Lincoln is before he's elected president, he does this speech where he talks about respect for the law, and he means the Constitution. And he said we should teach this to every baby. Every preacher in the pulpit ought to be preaching the Constitution. And you were talking earlier about these immigration pastors. Do you think they're preaching the Constitution from the pulpit?
No. So, Burton, you don't like him as...
No, I do. I think that he had a great reverence for the Constitution. He believed in natural rights, and as Larry was saying, and you were saying too, the problems that occurred in the war with the income tax, even a progressive income tax, the newspapers being denied civil liberties, even legislators being carted off and put into jail, even a congressman having his constitutional liberties violated. All of that was done away with after the war, and the nation went back on a path of redeeming a lot of the war debt.
Right.
We had paid off, in the 50 years after the Civil War, we paid off half of the Civil War debt.
I think you guys are going for real, those are really good examples. The one I always hear on Lincoln is, well, that he got rid of state rights. But I actually went down to the Civil War Museum in the South and asked to see a copy of the Constitution, and they rolled out the real copy, and I read it. And that's not about state rights. That is about slavery. Because you're joining the Confederacy, you don't have a right to drop out of slavery or tell anybody to no slavery. You had to participate in slavery. Correct?
There are 3 separate clauses in the Confederate Constitution dealing with slavery, and one of them says that even if, say, Alabama opts out of slavery, it still has to recognize the right of Mississippians or Floridians to bring slaves into Alabama.
Right.
So it's very clear what that document was about.
And it wasn't just allowing slavery, it was reestablishment of the slave trade.
Yes. So,
okay. All right, so let's go on Margaret Sanger, because in the history books, this is what they say about Margaret Sanger. Boy, she was a princess. She started the first birth control clinic in 1916. We're taught that she's a champion of women's reproductive rights. She coined the phrase birth control, founder of Planned Parenthood. But in infancy, the movement Sanger led was part of a radical vision for reforming the world that made common cause with the socialist and the IWW in challenging the limits of progressive reform.